On the 4th of August 2002, best friends Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, both aged 10, posed for a picture sporting their new red Manchester United football shirts before sitting down to dinner with family and friends. Shortly after dinner, Holly and Jessica stepped out of the house and went to a nearby sports centre to buy some sweets. They were never seen alive again. Our episodes deal with serious and often distressing incidents. If at any time you feel like you need support, please contact your local crisis centre. This episode discusses murder of children. It also discusses topics of rape and sexual assault, and therefore may be graphic and upsetting. It may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Holly Marie Wells, born on the 4th of October 1991, and Jessica Amy Chapman, born the 1st of September 1991, were two 10-year-old classmates who had been best friends since they were only 4 years old. They were always seen together and were known to be practically joined at the hip. They looked more like sisters than merely best friends. Bubbly and outgoing, Holly performed with the Fenland Majorettes and was also an active member of the Soham Brownies. She enjoyed singing and dancing. She also played the cornet and recorder. Her mum Nicola and dad Kevin and close family and friends said she had a lovely nature who loved Britney Spears and Kylie Minogue. She loved dressing up and caring for younger children. She was a very confident child who loved singing and dancing on stage in karaoke children's clubs. Jessica was the daughter of Leslie and Sharon Chapman and had two brothers. Jessica was known to her family and friends as a lively, kind-hearted and outgoing young girl. She was a bright and sociable young girl and enjoyed spending time with her best friend Holly. She was also known to have a caring nature, often looking out for others and offering a helping hand where needed. Both girls attended St Andrew's Church of England Primary School in Soham and were both popular and well-liked students. At 11:45 a.m. on Sunday the 4th of August 2002, Jessica Chapman left her home in Brook Street, Soham, for a barbecue at the home of her best friend Holly Wells in nearby Red House Gardens. She told her parents she was going to give her friend a necklace engraved with the letter H that she had purchased for her on a recent family holiday to Menorca. The two girls and their friend Natalie Parr played computer games and listened to music for about half an hour before Natalie returned home. By 3:15 p.m, both girls had changed into distinctive replica Manchester United football shirts, one of which belonged to Holly and the other to her older brother Oliver. At 5:04 p.m, Holly's mother took a photograph of the two before the children ate dinner with the other guests. They returned to playing upstairs in the house at about 6:10 p.m. Around 6:13 p.m, the two girls left the Wells residence without informing anyone to purchase sweets from a vending machine at the local sports centre. They were captured shortly after on a local CCTV camera wearing their matching Man United shirts, passing the Soham Sports Centre at 6:13 p.m. A witness leaving the centre 3 minutes later said she saw two girls in red shirts in the foyer. The same witness saw the girls again at 6:32 p.m. on College Road, walking along with their arms linked. While returning to Red House Gardens, Holly and Jessica walked past the college close home of Ian Huntley, the senior caretaker at the local secondary school. Huntley evidently lured the girls into his house, saying his girlfriend, Maxine Carr, the girls' teaching assistant at St Andrew's Primary School, was in the house. She was, in fact, visiting her mother in Grimsby, Lincolnshire. It took just 20 minutes for Holly and Jessica to go missing after they had left Holly's house. At around 8 p.m, Nicola Wells entered her daughter's bedroom to invite the girls to say goodbye to her guests, only to discover both children missing. Alarmed, she and her husband Kevin searched the house and nearby streets. Minutes after their daughter's 8:30 p.m. curfew had expired, Nicola Wells phoned the Chapmans to ask if the girls were there, only to learn Leslie and Sharon were worried that their youngest daughter had not returned home. Following frantic efforts by the families to locate their daughters, Holly and Jessica were reported missing by their parents at 9:55 p.m. Police immediately launched an intensive search for the missing children. Over 400 officers were assigned full-time to search for the girls. These officers conducted extensive house-to-house inquiries across Soham. Their efforts to search local terrain were supported by hundreds of local volunteers and later some United States Air Force personnel stationed at nearby air bases. To help their public appeals for information, Cambridgeshire Police released the photograph Nicola Wells had taken of the children less than 2 hours before their disappearance, depicting both girls wearing their Manchester United replica football shirts. A physical description of each girl was also released to the media, describing them as being white, about 4 foot 6 inches tall, and slim. Jessica was described as being tanned with shoulder-length brown hair. Holly was described as being fair with blonde hair. The parents of both girls stated that their daughters had been wary of talking with strangers, having been warned not to trust people they did not know from early childhood. This was supported by the head teacher of St Andrew's Primary School, who told reporters, "The possible danger from strangers is something we have impressed upon the children from an early age." Suspecting the children had been kidnapped, investigators questioned every registered sex offender in Cambridgeshire and neighbouring Lincolnshire. Over 260 registered sex offenders across the UK, including 15 high-risk paedophiles, were also questioned. All were eliminated from the investigation. Police also investigated the possibility that the girls had arranged to meet someone they had contacted via an internet chat room, but this was soon ruled out. On the 8th of August, CCTV footage of the girls, recorded minutes before their disappearance, was released to the public. This footage depicted them arriving at the local sports centre at 6:28 p.m. A televised reconstruction of the children's last known movements was broadcast nationally on the 10th of August, and both sets of parents granted an interview with presenter Colin Baker on ITV's Current Affairs programme Tonight, which was broadcast on the 12th of August. Other family members and friends of both girls also appealed via the media for the safe return of the children. These appeals for information on the whereabouts of Holly and Jessica produced over 2,000 phone calls and tips from the public, with all information obtained entered into the investigation's Holmes 2 database. The community held a candlelight vigil on the 7th of August. Shortly after the children's disappearance, Staffordshire Police contacted the investigating officers to report their suspicions the girls could have been abducted by the same man responsible for an abduction in their jurisdiction the previous year, in which a 6-year-old girl had survived an indecent assault by an abductor who was still at large and whose green Ford Mondeo had number plates which had earlier been stolen in Peterborough. The person responsible for this abduction and assault was also believed to have followed a 12-year-old girl in the same area, although in this instance his car had been fitted with number plates which had been stolen in Nottinghamshire. The same vehicle had recently been sighted in Glatton, Cambridgeshire. This information was later included in a televised appeal about the children's disappearance on the BBC's Crime Watch, but this potential lead failed to go anywhere. Several members of the public reported having seen the children in the early days of the investigation. Mark Tuck informed investigators that he had driven past the girls on Sand Street in Soham town centre at approximately 6:30 p.m. on the 4th of August. His attention had been drawn towards their Manchester United shirts, causing him to remark to his wife, "Look, there's two little Beckhams over there." A young woman named Karen Greenwood also reported seeing the girls walking arm in arm along College Road about 2 minutes later. Another woman living in nearby Little Thetford claimed to have seen two girls whose appearance and clothing matched those of Holly and Jessica walking past her home the morning after they had been reported missing. Police also received statements regarding a suspicious white van that had been seen in Soham on the evening of the children's disappearance. Investigators located and seized this vehicle from a caravan park in Wentworth on the 7th of August. This lead also proved fruitless. On the 12th of August, police launched an appeal to trace the driver of a four-door, dark green saloon car. A taxi driver stated he had seen him thrashing his arms as he struggled with two girls inside his vehicle as he drove on the A142 south of Soham towards Newmarket around the time that the girls were last seen. This vehicle was last seen turning into the Strudlands Park housing estate. The following evening, a jogger alerted police to two mounds of recently disturbed earth he had seen at Warren Hill, just outside Newmarket, which he speculated might have been the burial locations of the two girls. An overnight examination revealed them to be badger setts. One witness, who claimed to have spoken with the girls immediately before their disappearance, was 28-year-old Ian Huntley. Huntley informed investigators that on the 5th of August, he had had a brief conversation with both girls on his doorstep the previous afternoon. According to Huntley, Holly and Jessica, who he described as happy as Larry, had knocked on his door to inquire as to whether his partner, Maxine Carr, had been successful in a recent application for a full-time teaching assistant position at their school. When he had replied that she had not got the job, one of the girls had said, "Tell her we're sorry," before they both walked along College Road towards a bridge leading towards Clay Street. Police were suspicious of Huntley's account. A single police officer searched his house on the 5th of August. No incriminating evidence was discovered, but the officer noticed items of clothing on the washing line, despite the fact that it had been raining. In reference to the evident extensive cleaning of the house's interior, Huntley had said, "Excuse the dining room, we had a flood." This officer was unconvinced by Huntley's claims, and suspicious of his agitated demeanour. Huntley remained a strong suspect. On the 6th of August, Huntley drove from Soham to Grimsby to pick up Maxine Carr. Shortly before the two returned to College Close, a neighbour of Carr's mother named Marion Clift saw the couple standing at the rear of the vehicle with the boot open. According to Clift, a pale, shaking Huntley gazed into the boot for several moments, while Carr stood alongside him, her head bowed, weeping. When Huntley became aware of Clift's presence, he abruptly closed the boot. Ian Kevin Huntley was born in Grimsby, Lincolnshire, on the 31st of January 1974, the first of two sons born to Kevin Huntley and his wife, Linda. The Huntley family were working class and at the time of the birth of their first child, lodged with Linda's parents in Grimsby. Following the birth of their second child, Wayne, in August 1975, the family moved into a rented property in Immingham, where Huntley attended school. Huntley was a timid child and something of a mother's boy. In his early years, he frequently threw tantrums in order to get his mother's attention. Childhood friends later remarked how afraid he was of his stern father. At both primary and secondary school, Huntley was an average scholar. He was regarded as a loner, an oddball, and an attention seeker by his peers, and became a target for bullies. The bullying that Huntley endured escalated when he entered Healing Comprehensive School at aged 11, resulting in his academic performance waning. Huntley's parents enrolled their son in Immingham Comprehensive at age 13. He was again the target of physical and verbal bullying at this school, but did form a few friendships via a shared interest in computer games. Huntley also enjoyed football and was an avid supporter of Manchester United. He left school in the summer of 1990 with 5 A to C grades in his GCSEs, but decided to go into employment rather than study further. At the urging of his father, Huntley joined the Air Training Corps at age 13. His activities with this youth organisation fuelled an interest he had held since childhood for aeroplanes, and he seriously considered a future career with the Royal Air Force. Huntley also developed a hobby for plane spotting. Via this hobby, he became familiar with the location and grounds of RAF Lakenheath. Throughout the 1990s, Huntley worked at various unskilled, low-salary jobs. He was also investigated by the police on at least 10 occasions for rape, underage sex, indecent assault, and burglary. 1 rape and 1 burglary resulted in criminal charges, but in both cases the charges were dropped by the Crown Prosecution Service because it was decided that there was not enough evidence. In October 1993, he was convicted of riding an unlicensed and uninsured motorcycle and received a £250 fine. In June 1994, Huntley began dating 18-year-old Claire Evans, who he met through his employment at a local Heinz factory. After 2 months of courtship, Huntley proposed to Evans. The couple married at Grimsby Registry Office on the 28th of January 1995. The marriage was short-lived due to Huntley's volatile temper, which surfaced within days of their marriage. Within a month, Huntley had begun to regularly sexually assault his wife, also subjecting her to indignities such as locking her in their house and cutting off her hair. On one occasion, he beat his wife so badly she suffered a miscarriage. Following several weeks of mistreatment, Huntley's wife announced her intention to leave him. In an attempt to emotionally blackmail his wife into remaining with him, Huntley feigned an illness and later began drooling before faking an epileptic seizure. Neither ploy succeeded. Shortly after their separation, Huntley's wife formed a relationship with and later married Huntley's younger brother Wayne. In March 1996, Huntley was charged with burglary. In this offence, he and an accomplice allegedly broke into the house of a neighbour in Grimsby and stole electrical goods, jewellery and cash. The case reached court, but the prosecution offered no evidence, resulting in a judge ordering that the offence lie on file. Between August 1995 and May 1996, Huntley established numerous sexual relationships with teenage girls, all of whom were under the legal age of consent. 3 of them were aged 15 and 1 was 13. One of these girls would become pregnant at age 15 and gave birth to a baby girl in 1998. Although reported to police on 3 occasions, Huntley was not charged for any of these offences, as each of the girls denied having engaged in sex with Huntley. Each refused to file criminal complaints or accept help from social services. Rumours of Huntley's sexual interest in underage girls soon became community gossip, and he was regularly insulted by neighbours and colleagues. As a result, he began rebuffing any offers to socialise with colleagues for fear of being attacked while alone in their company. In April 1998, Huntley was arrested on suspicion of raping an 18-year-old woman. He admitted engaging in sex with the complainant, but claimed that the act had been consensual. He was not charged. A month later, Huntley was charged and remanded in custody at HMP Wolds for 1 week after another 18-year-old Grimsby woman claimed that Huntley beat and raped her while she was walking home from a local nightclub. This complainant stated that Huntley had threatened to kill her before assaulting her. Huntley admitted having sex with this woman, but insisted the act had also been consensual. The criminal charge was dropped a week later after the Crown Prosecution Service, having examined CCTV footage from the nightclub and finding evidence of the two socialising within the club. The CPS determined that there was insufficient evidence to secure a conviction for this offence. As a result of this complaint, further rumours regarding Huntley's sexual violence also became community gossip, resulting in Huntley being fired from his job and forcing him to move into his mother's home. He was also forbidden from initiating contact with his baby daughter or her mother. In July 1998, police were notified that Huntley had sexually assaulted an 11-year-old girl in the town of Cleethorpes in September 1997, having also threatened to kill the child if she informed her mother. He was never charged with this offence, but subsequently confessed to this attack in April 2007. The final criminal allegation against Huntley prior to the Soham murders dates from July 1999. In this instance, a woman was raped, and Huntley, by this stage suspected by police as being a serial sex offender, was interviewed. Huntley supplied a DNA sample to assist in their inquiries, with Maxine Carr also providing an alibi to support his claims of innocence. The victim of this assault later said that Huntley had not been the perpetrator of her assault. By 2001, Huntley's proven and alleged criminal activities had been reported to Humberside Police on 10 occasions and to the social services on 5 occasions. Maxine Carr was born Maxine Anne Capp. She was born in Grimsby, Lincolnshire, on the 16th of February 1977, the second of 2 daughters born to Alfred Capp and his wife Shirley. The marriage between Carr's parents was marred by frequent arguments. Following a heated argument in mid-1979, Shirley ordered her husband to leave the household. Shortly thereafter, she and her daughters moved to the village of Kilby. Alfred seldom maintained contact with his wife and children and refused to provide any financial support for his daughters. Carr and her older sister Hayley, born in 1967, were largely raised by their mother and grandparents. The family regularly experienced financial difficulties, but Shirley would later state that she spoiled her daughters to the best of her financial ability. As a child and adolescent, Carr was viewed by her peers as a timid outcast with few friends. She performed poorly academically, but always aspired to become a teacher. By the time Carr entered adolescence, she was slightly overweight, leading her to become insecure about her physical appearance. She had shunned the company of boys as a child, but as a teenager, craved, but seldom received, the attention of boys her age, occasionally leading to bouts of binge eating, in addition to her developing the habit of self-harming. By the age of 15, Carr weighed more than 10 stones, or 63 kilograms, resulting in her being bullied by her classmates. In an effort to lose weight, she developed a habit of forcing herself to vomit after eating. This led to her developing anorexia at 16, with her weight at one stage plummeting to 6 stone, or 38 kilograms, and her mother forcing her to eat in order for her to regain weight. In 1993, Carr finished her schooling, having obtained no qualifications. She briefly worked alongside her mother in a fish processing plant, as she considered which career path she would choose before enrolling at the Grimsby Institute of Further and Higher Education, having chosen to study general care. Carr obtained her diploma in 1996. The same year, she and her mother moved from Kilby back to Grimsby. Shortly thereafter, she briefly worked as a junior care assistant at a care home for the elderly in Grimsby, then returned to work alongside her mother as a labourer at Blue Crest fish processing plant. Several of Carr's colleagues later remarked how they found her to be a distant and immature figure with few friends or hobbies. To one colleague, Carr would talk incessantly about her dreams of leaving this employment and embarking on a teaching career. By the time Carr had obtained employment at Blue Crest, she had garnered sufficient courage to begin dating men. But none of these relationships lasted more than a few months. Shy and reserved, and prone to wearing clothing which revealed her figure, Carr became markedly flirtatious when having consumed alcohol, and is known to have occasionally engaged in exhibitionism, in addition to frequently engaging in one-night stands with people she encountered in pubs and clubs. While Carr resided with her mother in Grimsby, she unofficially adopted the surname Benson. She later legally changed her surname to Carr in an apparent effort to distance herself from her father. In February 1999, Huntley met 22-year-old Maxine Carr in a Grimsby nightclub. On this occasion, Carr had been drinking with a former boyfriend named Paul Selby when Huntley, a casual acquaintance of Selby, approached the two and initiated a conversation. According to Carr, she was instantly attracted to Huntley's self-confident and pleasant persona and agreed to begin dating him that evening. Within 4 weeks of their acquaintance, she had moved into Huntley's Barton-upon-Humber flat, and the couple informed relatives of their eagerness to start a family. Shortly thereafter, the couple moved to a ground floor flat in Scunthorpe, where Huntley formally proposed to Carr in June 1999. Although they were a besotted couple in public, Huntley was very possessive of Carr and is known to have emotionally abused or physically assaulted her frequently, often culminating in Carr returning to live with her mother before Huntley persuaded her to return to him. Both Huntley and Carr were known to have conducted affairs throughout their relationship. Noting how Carr often became flirtatious when she consumed alcohol, Huntley sought to minimise any opportunity for her to drink or otherwise socialise outside his presence for fear of her cheating on him with other males. When they met, Huntley temporarily worked for an insurance company in Market Raisin. He soon found new employment at a finance company in Binbrook, while Carr maintained her employment packing fish at a local fish processing factory. The couple relocated to East Anglia in early 2001. Shortly thereafter, Huntley obtained employment as a barman in a local pub. By 2001, Huntley had re-established contact with his father, who worked as a school caretaker in Littleport near Ely. He regularly travelled to Cambridgeshire from East Anglia on his days off to help his father, and soon developed aspirations to become a school caretaker himself. Via his father, Huntley learned of a school caretaker vacancy in nearby Soham Village College in mid-2001. He applied for and secured employment as a senior caretaker at this secondary school in September 2001, supervising the work of 4 other employees. He applied for this job using the alias Ian Nixon. No background check was conducted before or after this job interview, and although Huntley lacked extensive experience in this form of employment, his application for this position was successful. His employers helped him to get the tenancy of 5 College Close, and he and Carr moved to Soham in late September. Huntley began work at Soham Village College on the 26th of November. He worked as a senior caretaker there until his arrest. In February 2002, Huntley found Carr a part-time job at St Andrew's Primary School. Although she lied about her academic qualifications when applying for this position, she was successful in gaining the job. This employment was initially voluntary work, but Carr later became a teaching assistant in the school's Year 5 class. Holly and Jessica became two of the pupils she taught, and both girls were fond of her. In July 2002, Carr applied for the vacant full-time teaching assistant position at St Andrew's Primary School. She found out on the 23rd of July that her application had been unsuccessful. One of the children to express dismay at this decision was Holly, who, having broken down in tears upon learning Carr's application had been declined, presented her with a hand-drawn card depicting a smiling face in which she stated, "I'll miss you a lot. Thank you. See ya around school. Miss ya. Love, Holly." By mid-2002, the physical relationship between Huntley and Carr had begun to deteriorate. By Huntley's own later admission, he had become sexually frustrated and had unsuccessfully attempted to persuade a married colleague to date him on the weekend Carr visited her family in Grimsby. At 9:53 a.m. on the 4th of August, the day of the murders, Huntley attempted to phone Carr, but she did not answer her phone. Carr only replied to his missed call at 6:23 p.m. This 4-minute phone call escalated into a heated argument, culminating in Huntley angrily terminating the phone call after she informed him of her intentions to socialise in Grimsby that evening. 4 minutes later, Carr sent Huntley a text message which read, "Don't make me feel bad because I'm with my family." Huntley did not reply to this message. In the weeks following the disappearances, Huntley reluctantly granted several television interviews to media outlets such as Sky News and the regional BBC news programme BBC Look East, speaking of the general shock in the local community and his dismay at being the last person to see the children alive. By the second week of the children's disappearance, Huntley had become an unofficial spokesman for the community of Soham. His explanation for this was that he wanted to convey to the media the frustration and despair the community was feeling. In one interview with Sky News correspondent Jeremy Thompson, during the second week of the search, he claimed to be holding on to a glimmer of hope that the children would be found safe and well, and that he had last seen the girls walking in the direction of a local library.
How do we know they were here at 6:15? Well, we have an eyewitness. Ian Huntley here is a familiar figure. Evening, Ian. You're the school caretaker. The girls, Jessica and Holly, would know you, and they saw you on the front doorstep. What went on?
Well, I don't know the girls. I was stood on the front doorstep grooming my dog down. She'd run away and come back a bit of a mess. They just came across and asked how Miss Carr was, as she used to teach them at St Andrews. I just said she weren't very good, as she hadn't got the job. And they just said, please tell her that we're very sorry. And off they walked in the direction of the library over there.
Carr was also interviewed by the press during the second week of the search for the children. In this live interview, Carr corroborated Huntley's claims to have conversed with the children on their doorstep as she had been bathing before both girls had walked away, adding, "I only wish we had asked them where they were going. If only we knew then what we know now, then we could have stopped them or done something about it." During one of the interview had to be restarted as Carr kept referring to the girls in the past tense and laughing into the camera when she noticed her mistake and corrected it.
The jurors were told how one BBC interview had to be restarted as Carr was referring to the girls in the past tense.
Very pretty girls, very lovely girls, but Holly was more of the is more of the...
Sorry. Even worse.
Discussing the personalities of the girls, Carr described Holly as being the more feminine of the two, adding that Jessica was more of a tomboy, and that on one occasion she had jokingly remarked to Jessica how, unlike many of her friends, she seldom wore a skirt. To this question, Carr stated that Jessica had expressed her desire to be a bridesmaid at her own future wedding, adding that Jessica had said she would willingly wear a dress for such an occasion. Carr also displayed a thank you card to this reporter, which had recently been given to her by Holly on the last day of the school year. Referring to Holly in the past tense, Carr stated, "She was just lovely, really lovely," before making a direct appeal to the children. Just get on the phone and just come home. Or if somebody's got them, just let them go. By the second week of the children's disappearance, Huntley had begun to lose weight and was displaying visible symptoms of insomnia. To one officer, he said, "You think I've done it? I was the last person to see them," before beginning to weep. His erratic behaviour and apparent distress led to him being prescribed antidepressants on the 13th of August. Having participated in the search for the children, Huntley regularly asked police officers questions such as how their investigation was progressing and how long DNA evidence could survive before deteriorating. One of these officers observed 3 vertical scratches on Huntley's left jaw, each measuring approximately 3 centimetres, which he claimed had been recently inflicted by his dog. On the 16th of August, 12 days after the children's disappearance, Huntley and Carr were first questioned by the police. Both were questioned for approximately 7 hours. Each provided witness statements before being placed in a safe house in the village of Histon. By this date, police had received information from several Grimsby residents who had recognised Huntley in the television interviews he had given, and recalled that he had been accused of rape several years earlier. Others had said that, contrary to her televised claims, Carr had been socialising in Grimsby town centre on the night of the girl's disappearance and was not at home in Soham as she had claimed to the media. The same evening, police conducted a thorough search of both 5 College Close and the grounds of Soham Village College, where Huntley worked as the caretaker. The couple remained under police watch at separate locations outside Soham. Each room of Huntley's home had evidently been recently and meticulously cleaned with what was later described as being a lemony cleaning fluid. But the search of the home revealed many items of major importance to the investigation. The evidence and artefacts were not made public at the time, but the items recovered from the school grounds included items of clothing the girls had been wearing when last seen. Their charred and cut Manchester United shirts were recovered from a bin in a hangar at Huntley's place of work. The burnt remains of the girls' underwear was also found, as well as 1 charred shoe. Fibres recovered from these garments were a precise match to samples retrieved from Huntley's body and clothing, as well as from 5 College Close. 2 of Huntley's hairs and his fingerprints were recovered from the bin. Some 49 tiny fibres matching the girls' shirts were found on Huntley's clothes and around his house. Fibres from Huntley's carpet and curtains were also found on the shirts, establishing a 2-way link between the clothes, the girls, and Huntley's home. Huntley's Ford Fiesta was also forensically examined on the 16th of August. This revealed that the car had also been recently extensively cleaned, but traces of a mixture of brick dust, chalk, and concrete of the same type used to pave the road leading to where the girls' bodies would be discovered were found around the wheel arches and on and around the pedals. a cover from the rear seat was missing, and the lining of the boot had been recently removed and replaced with an ill-fitting section of household carpet. Having discovered the children's clothes at Soham Village College, police decided to arrest Huntley and Carr. Both were arrested on suspicion of abduction and murder at 4:30 a.m. on the 17th of August. Investigators had stated on the 7th of August that they strongly believed the children had been abducted and announced their strong suspicions that both girls had been murdered on this date. During initial questioning, Huntley refused to answer questions and appeared evasive, confused, and emotionally detached, occasionally drooling during police attempts to question him in an effort to feign mental illness. This left police with no option but to refer Huntley to a mental hospital to undergo an extensive psychological evaluation. By contrast, Carr quickly confessed to detectives that she had lied about her whereabouts and Huntley's actions on the 4th of August, as shortly before she had returned to Soham from Grimsby 3 days later, Huntley had claimed to her in a phone call to have seen the two girls shortly before their disappearance, admitting, "The thing is, Maxine, they came in our house." According to Carr, Huntley then informed her the children had entered their home in order that Holly could stop her nosebleed. He then claimed to her that Jessica had sat on their bed as he helped Holly control the bleeding from her nose before both girls had left their home. Referencing one of the 1998 rapes he had allegedly committed but had earlier claimed to her to have been falsely accused of in this phone call, Huntley then began voicing concerns as to again being falsely accused of involvement on this occasion, also claiming his previous arrest had caused him to suffer a nervous breakdown. She had therefore later agreed to concoct a false story with Huntley to support his version of events. At about 12:30 p.m. on the 17th of August, a 48-year-old gamekeeper named Keith Pryor discovered the bodies of both girls laying side by side in a 5-foot-deep irrigation ditch close to a pheasant pen, near the perimeter fence of RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk, more than 10 miles east of Soham. Pryor had noticed what he later described as an unusual and unpleasant smell in the area several days earlier. When returning to the area with two friends on the 17th of August, he had decided to investigate its cause. Walking through an overgrown verge about 600 yards from a partially tarmacked road, Pryor and one of his companions, Adrian Lawrence, discovered the children's bodies. Lawrence immediately turned to his girlfriend, Helen Sawyer, and shouted, "Don't come any closer, Helen. Get back in the van." Lawrence immediately reported the discoveries to the police. The girls had been missing for 13 days when their bodies were found, and their corpses were in an advanced state of decomposition. In an apparent effort to destroy forensic evidence, the murderer had attempted to burn both bodies. No clear footprints were discovered at the crime scene. Despite this, investigators rapidly deduced who the two victims most likely were, and that they had not died where their bodies had been discovered. Numerous hairs, later determined to belong to Jessica, were discovered on a tree branch close to the location of the girls' bodies. The following day, Cambridgeshire Deputy Chief Constable Keith Hodder released a press statement to the media confirming the discovery of the children's bodies, adding that both families had been informed of the developments and that although positive formal identification would take several days, investigators were as certain as they possibly could be that the bodies were those of Holly and Jessica. After being informed of the discovery of the children's bodies and the evidence of Huntley's guilt, including his fingerprints being recovered from the bin in which the children's clothes had been found, Carr burst into tears, shouting, "No, he can't have been. It can't have been. He hasn't done it." Despite these revelations, Carr initially remained emotionally attached to Huntley and professed her belief in his innocence to both the police and her family. On the 21st of August, the bodies of both girls were identified via DNA testing. 9 days later, a public memorial service was held at Ely Cathedral for both girls. This service was attended by about 2,000 people, including the girls' classmates, teachers, and the 6 family liaison officers who had provided 24-hour service for both families. The Reverend Tim Alban Jones officiated at this service, saying, "Would not the best and most lasting memorial to these 2 lovely young girls be a change for the better in how we behave towards each other? Today's service is a small milestone in our shared journey of grief and sorrow. It is our hope that we may perhaps draw a line under one phase of our grieving and begin to look forward." An online book of condolence attracted more than 31,000 messages of grief and sympathy, and on the 24th of August, football clubs across Britain held a minute's silence before games. The inquest into the children's deaths was held at Shire Hall, Cambridge, on the 23rd of August 2002. Coroner David Morris testified that the bodies of both girls were partially skeletonized and that no precise cause of death could be determined for either of them. Morris stated that the most likely cause of death of both girls had been asphyxiation. He also stated that the girls had almost certainly not died at the location where their bodies had been discovered, and that both bodies had been placed there within 24 hours of their deaths. These conclusions were physically supported by an analysis of the shoots of nettles at the crime scene, which enabled forensic ecologist and palynologist Patricia Wiltshire to estimate that the bodies had been placed at this location almost 2 weeks before. The funeral services for Holly and Jessica were held on consecutive days in September 2002. Both services were held at St Andrew's Parish Church and officiated by Tim Alban Jones. The girls were buried in graves next to each other in Soham's Fordham Road Cemetery. At the request of both families, the media refrained from reporting on either service. On the 20th of August, investigators had established sufficient physical evidence from Huntley's home, vehicle, and Soham Village College to charge him with 2 counts of murder. He was charged with these offences while detained for observation at Rampton Secure Hospital in Nottinghamshire. All preliminary hearings against him were postponed until the conclusion of his mental health assessment. Carr was also charged with attempting to pervert the course of justice on this date. She was further charged with 2 counts of assisting an offender on the 17th of January 2003. Whilst held on remand at Holloway Prison, Carr regularly inquired as to Huntley's welfare and wrote several letters in which she professed her continued love for him. Carr only severed contact with Huntley in December 2002. To determine Huntley's state of mental health, he was detained under Section 48 of the Mental Health Act for almost 2 months at Rampton Secure Hospital. Here, his mental state was assessed by Christopher Clark, a consultant forensic psychiatrist, to determine whether he suffered from any form of mental illness and whether he was mentally competent to stand trial. Clark concluded in October that, although psychopathic, Huntley did not suffer from any major mental or psychotic illness. On the 8th of October, Huntley was deemed mentally competent to stand trial. Christopher Clark said, that although Mr. Huntley made clear attempts to appear insane, I have no doubt that the man currently and at the time of the murders was both physically and mentally sound, and therefore, if he is found guilty, carried out the murders totally aware of his actions. Having been declared mentally fit to stand trial, Huntley was faced with a sentence of life imprisonment if a jury could be convinced of his guilt. He was transferred to a segregation unit at Wood Hill Prison in Milton Keynes in Buckinghamshire. On the 9th of June 2003, he attempted suicide by taking 29 antidepressants which he had accumulated in his cell. Prison staff initially feared that Huntley might die as a result of this overdose, but he was later returned to his prison cell within 48 hours. Huntley was later transferred to London's Belmarsh Prison. At a preliminary hearing at the Old Bailey on the 16th of June 2003, Huntley pleaded not guilty to the charges of murdering Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, and guilty to the charge that both defendants stood accused of, conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Carr pleaded not guilty to the charges of attempting to pervert the course of justice and assisting an offender. The trial of Huntley for the murders of Holly and Jessica opened at the Old Bailey on the 5th of November 2003 before Mr. Justice Alan Moses. In his opening statement on behalf of the Crown, prosecutor Richard Latham QC described the last day of the girls' lives and how, by pure chance, they had happened to pass by Huntley's home at a time when Carr was not present. Latham contended that Huntley had deliberately lured them into his home at approximately 6:37 p.m. and that both had been murdered shortly thereafter, with cell site analysis showing Huntley had switched off Jessica's mobile phone either outside his home or within the grounds of Soham Village College. Latham described how mobile phone records and eyewitness accounts placed Carr in Grimsby on the evening in question, showing the statements she had given to police and press had been false. He then outlined the details of how Keith Pryor and his two friends had discovered the bodies on the 17th of August at a location Huntley had known from his plane spotting hobby and where they were unlikely to be discovered. Referencing the likely motive for the girls' murder and the cause of death for each victim, Latham stated that due to extensive state of decomposition of the bodies, the coroner had been unable to determine the precise cause of death of either child, or whether they had been sexually assaulted before or after death. Latham stated that neither body showed signs of compressive neck injuries, knife wounds, drugging or poisoning, and that both girls had most likely died of asphyxiation. In a reference to Huntley's claims that both girls' deaths had been accidental, Latham stated that only one person knows what happened after they entered his home. He stressed that the cause of death was murder, adding that 10-year-old girls don't just drop dead. In reference to Carr's attempts to pervert the course of justice, Latham stated that, as surely as night follows day, the two had conspired to concoct a false alibi to divert suspicion from Huntley, but warned the jury Carr could only be convicted of assisting an offender if they believed she had known Huntley had murdered the girls, adding that her motive for providing lies to police with reference to the charge of perverting the course of justice was irrelevant. Over the course of 3 days, Latham outlined the efforts of both defendants to divert suspicion away from Huntley, and Huntley's own efforts to destroy all physical and circumstantial evidence linking him to the crime. But despite these efforts, investigators had retrieved enough evidence to show the girls had been murdered within his home and, within approximately 12 hours of their deaths, transported in his vehicle to the location where their bodies were discovered on the 17th of August. This had included fibre evidence retrieved from Huntley's vehicle clothes and carpets which had been a precise match to the Manchester United shirts the girls had been wearing at the time of their disappearance. Latham then closed his statement by again bringing the jury's attention to Huntley's claim that both deaths had been accidental, remarking, "We posed this question. 2 of them?" He then speculated that Huntley's defence counsel may try and argue that he had been confused, commenting, "In that case, they would have to consider Huntley's behaviour over the fortnight between the girls' disappearance and their bodies being found." Testimony relating to the forensic evidence linking Huntley was heard on the 24th of November. On this date, a forensic scientist, Helen Davey, testified about the biological evidence recovered from the girls' clothing, footwear, and a dishcloth discovered in the hangar at Soham Village College on the 16th of August. Davey testified that she had found minute traces of blood and saliva on these objects, but no positive traces of semen. She explained the reason for the lack of any trace of semen being discovered could have been a result of the charred and melted condition of the articles she had inspected. A scenes of crime officer also testified that despite Huntley's exhaustive efforts to remove physical evidence of his crime from his home, a forensic examination had revealed several traces of blood spattering about the hallway and main entrance to the master bedroom. On the 1st of December, Huntley testified before the court in his defence. Responding to questioning by his defence counsel, Stephen Coward, QC, Huntley admitted both girls had died in his house, but denied that either death had been intentional. According to Huntley, he, Holly and Jessica had entered his bathroom to stem a mild nosebleed Holly had been suffering when the girls had walked past his home. The bath was already filled with water as he had been cleaning his dog that afternoon. In the bathroom, he had slipped and accidentally knocked Holly into his bath while helping her stem her nosebleed, and this unintentional act had caused her to drown as he panicked and froze. He further claimed that Jessica had witnessed this accident and began repeatedly screaming, "You pushed her," and that he had then accidentally suffocated her while attempting to stifle her screaming, which had preoccupied his attention, as opposed to ensuring Holly did not drown. By the time his state of panic had waned, it had been too late to save the lives of either of the children, and that his first coherent memory had been of sitting on his vomit-stained landing close to Jessica's body. When questioned about his failure to call emergency services and subsequent extensive efforts to destroy evidence and divert suspicion from himself, Huntley insisted he had first become preoccupied with whether the police and the public would believe the girl's death had been accidental, and he had decided to conceal all evidence of the deaths as opposed to either notifying police or paramedics. Weeping in the witness box, Huntley admitted responsibility for both deaths, but repeated his insistence that both deaths had been accidental. He tearfully claimed that he had not attempted to feign insanity upon his arrest, insisting the trauma of the children's deaths had temporarily erased his memory, and being in the presence of police had caused his mind to temporarily seize. On the 3rd of December, Carr went into the witness box to testify in her own defence. Responding to questioning from her defence counsel, Michael Hubbard, QC, Carr briefly discussed her initial acquaintance with Huntley, their subsequent relationship, and plans to start a family once they both obtained financial stability. Hubbard directed his questioning toward her return to Soham on the 6th of August, and her discovering Huntley had recently washed their bedding and had evidently cleaned sections of the house. To these questions, Carr explained that her first impression had been that Huntley had had a woman in the house, adding that their bedding had been washed shortly before the 4th of August. Carr further testified to having noted a crack in the enamel of the bathtub, which had not been there when she had travelled to Grimsby 4 days previously. When questioned about why she had then helped Huntley in extensively cleaning their home in the days after the children's murder, Carr claimed that she had done so as she had always been obsessive about tidiness. When questioned about the efforts she had made to mislead both police and the media to divert suspicion from her partner, Carr emphasised that she had only lied to police, the media, and anyone who asked to protect Huntley, who had repeatedly assured her of his innocence of any wrongdoing and his fear of being fitted up by the police for the girl's disappearance should they discover the 1998 rape allegation made against him. She further claimed to have referred to Holly and Jessica using past tense merely because she had worked with the children in the past. Carr said that she had tried to persuade Huntley to contact the police and be open about his claims to have invited the children into his home for Holly to stanch her nosebleed, but that he had refused to do so, as inviting children into their home had been a violation of the rules imposed by St Andrew's Primary School. She further explained her focus had therefore been to protect Huntley's job and reputation, adding that if she had known of Huntley's guilt, she would never have attempted to provide him with a false alibi, stating to her counsel, "If for a minute I had known or believed he'd murdered either of those girls, I would have been horrified." Concluding his questioning, Hubbard cautioned the jury not to succumb to the temptation of judging Carr's morality, but to consider her state of mind prior to her arrest when considering whether the lies she had told warranted any criminal liability, stating she had done no wrong on the date of the children's murder and had not returned to Soham until the 6th of August. On the 10th of December, counsel for both prosecution and defence delivered their closing arguments to the jury. Latham delivered his closing argument on behalf of the prosecution by describing Huntley and Carr as accomplished liars, before outlining the prosecution's case that both children had to die to satisfy Huntley's selfish self-interest, before Huntley, with Carr's support, had embarked on 12 days of cynical deception, with Carr only revealing the truth to police after being informed of the discovery of the children's bodies. Referencing Huntley's likely motive for the murders and his claims at trial that both deaths had been accidental, Latham stated, "We invite you to reject the accounts of both deaths being accidental as desperate lies, the only way out for him. We suggest that this whole business in the house was motivated by something sexual. But whatever he initiated plainly went wrong. Therefore, in this ruthless man's mind, both girls had to die in his own selfish self-interest." Referencing Carr's conscious efforts to deceive the police and the media alike, Latham stated, "She had the prospect of marriage, a baby, a nice home, and a new start. She preferred to do what she could to make the best of the position she was in. That involved, at all costs, protecting Ian Huntley." Following the conclusion of the prosecution's closing argument, Stephen Coward delivered his argument on behalf of the defence. He conceded his client was guilty of physical responsibility for the girls' actual deaths, as Huntley had admitted, and therefore deserved punishment, but argued that the prosecution had failed to provide definitive proof that Huntley had intended to murder the children or cause them bodily harm. Coward also contended the prosecution had failed to provide conclusive evidence to support their claim that Huntley's actual motive for the murders had been sexual. Stephen Coward concluded his closing argument by requesting the jury deliver a verdict of manslaughter in relation to both deaths. Following the conclusion of both counsels' closing arguments, Mr. Justice Moses announced the jury would begin their deliberations on the 12th of December. The jury deliberated for 4 days before reaching their verdicts against both defendants. On the 17th of December 2003, they returned a majority verdict of guilty on 2 counts of murder against Huntley. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of imprisonment to be imposed by the Lord Chief Justice at a later date. Huntley's face showed no emotion as the verdict was announced. The mothers of both Holly and Jessica burst into tears. Carr pleaded guilty to the charge of perverting the course of justice and not guilty to the charge of assisting an offender. The jury accepted her insistence that she had only lied to the police and the media in order to protect Huntley because, prior to their arrest, she had believed his claims of innocence. As such, she was found not guilty of assisting an offender. Carr was sentenced to serve 3.5 years in prison for perverting the course of justice. Minutes after the convictions, the parents of both girls granted an interview to the media. Discussing Huntley's mindset, Leslie Chapman opined, "I think he was a time bomb waiting to go off, and both our girls were in the wrong place at the wrong time. I hope the next time I see him, it will be like we saw our daughters, and it will be in a coffin." On the 29th of September 2005, High Court Judge Mr. Justice Moses announced that Huntley must remain in prison until he has served a minimum of 40 years imprisonment, a term which would not allow parole eligibility until 2042, by which time he would be 68 years old. In setting this minimum term of imprisonment, Mr. Justice Moses stated, "The order I make offers little or no hope of the defendant's eventual release." Huntley avoided eligibility for a whole life tariff as the passing of the Criminal Justice Act of 2003 had been 1 day after his conviction, thus taking effect on the 18th of December 2003 and applying solely to murders committed on or after this date. An orange-petalled rose dedicated to the memory of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman was unveiled by representatives of Soham Town Council at the 2003 Chelsea Flower Show. The inspiration for dedicating a flower to the children's memory came from a poem read aloud at the memorial service at Ely Cathedral on the 30th of August 2002 by the father of Holly, titled Soham's Rose. On the 3rd of April 2004, the 3-bedroomed house in College Close, in which the murders occurred, was demolished and the site levelled, with all rubble from the property being discarded in various undisclosed locations. The site where 5 College Close once stood is now a vacant patch of grass. Within days of Huntley's formal sentencing, he reflected to the media on the prospect of spending the remainder of his life behind bars and of his fears for his safety, stating, "I'm going to rot inside this place. I'll rot in here, I know it. I'll spend the rest of my life in here. I'm going to be inside forever, and it will be torture." In the years since his incarceration, Huntley has been repeatedly attacked by other inmates. On the 14th of September 2005, while an inmate at HM Prison Wakefield, he was scalded with boiling water by convicted spree killer Mark Hobson. The injuries Huntley received in this attack resulted in his being unable to attend the hearing at which his minimum term of imprisonment was decided. Following this attack, Huntley alleged that prison authorities had failed in their duty of care towards him and launched a claim for £15,000 in compensation. He was reportedly awarded £2,500 in legal aid to pursue this claim. Huntley was transferred from Wakefield Prison to Franklin Prison on the 23rd of January 2008. 2 years later, on the 21st of March 2010, he received non-life-threatening injuries to his neck after his throat was slashed by convicted armed robber Damien Folkes. The injuries that Huntley received in this attack required hospital treatment. Huntley again applied for compensation for the injuries he received in this attack, seeking £20,000 in damages. On the 5th of September 2006, Huntley attempted to kill himself by taking an overdose of antidepressants he had accumulated in his prison cell. This resulted in his hospitalisation and a thorough search of his cell, in which a cassette tape was recovered. This cassette tape contained a very different account of the murders of Holly and Jessica than that to which Huntley had testified at his trial. In what Huntley had believed would be his posthumous confession, he claims to have confessed to having murdered both girls to Carr prior to their arrest, and his plans to confess to authorities, to which Huntley alleged Carr had slapped his face and informed him to pull himself together, as she did not want to lose the teaching position she had yearned for all her life. Huntley further alleges that Carr had encouraged him to burn both bodies in an attempt to destroy all forensic evidence linking him to the crime. It is believed that Huntley agreed to make this recording for a fellow prisoner, who had hoped to later sell the confession to the media after his release, in return for being provided with the antidepressants he had used to attempt suicide. In April 2007, Huntley confessed to having sexually assaulted an 11-year-old girl he had dragged into an orchard in 1997. This admission, in which Huntley also confessed to having a sexual interest in children, while insisting the murders of Holly and Jessica had not been sexually motivated, was welcomed by the victim of this sexual assault. Following Huntley's admission of guilt, this victim issued a press statement in which she confessed to feeling a massive sense of relief, but concluded this statement with the sentence, "Yet, I still feel upset that Huntley was left at large, resulting in the deaths of 2 innocent children." Maxine Carr was released on probation from HMP Foston Hall on the 14th of May 2004 after serving a total of 21 months imprisonment, including the 16 months she had been detained while on remand. She was given a secret identity to protect her from threats of attack from vengeful members of the public, in addition to being provided with a new home in an undisclosed location. At the time, Carr was one of 4 former prisoners in the UK to be given a new identity upon release. Carr won an injunction on the 24th of February 2005, granting her lifelong anonymity on the grounds that her life would otherwise be in danger. The costs of imposing this order have been reported by differing tabloid newspapers as being between £1 million and £50 million. At least a dozen women have been falsely identified as being Carr and either persecuted or physically attacked due to false stories speculating as to her whereabouts and new identity, which have been printed in tabloid publications. Shortly after her release from prison, Carr and her family contacted a Tyneside-based publishing company with view to publishing her autobiography. Mirage Publishing initially agreed to publish Carr's autobiography, but withdrew their offer after a feature on BBC Radio Newcastle prompted scores of complaints from the public. Immediately after Huntley's conviction, previous criminal allegations against him were made public. These disclosures revealed that not only had police failed to pursue numerous previous criminal complaints of sexual offences against underage girls and young women by Huntley, but he had then secured a job in Soham, allowing him access to children. Upon learning of these public disclosures, Home Secretary David Blunkett announced a public inquiry into the intelligence-based record-keeping and vetting system which had allowed Huntley to obtain employment as a school caretaker despite these previous criminal complaints, which had been reported to police and Social Services. Chaired by Sir Michael Bichard, the Bichard Inquiry opened on the 13th of January 2004. The results of this inquiry were published that June. The stated purpose of the Bichard Inquiry was to urgently inquire into child protection procedures in Humberside Police and Cambridgeshire Constabulary in the light of the recent trial and conviction of Ian Huntley for the murders of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. In particular, to assess the effectiveness of the relevant intelligence-based record keeping, the vetting practices in those forces since 1995, and information sharing with other agencies, and to report to the Home Secretary on matters of local and national relevance and make recommendations as appropriate. One of the issues scrutinised by the Bichard report surfaced almost immediately when Humberside Police stated their belief that it was unlawful under the Data Protection Act to hold data regarding criminal allegations which had not led to a conviction. This claim was criticised by other police forces who thought this too strict an interpretation of the Act. The inquiry scrutinised the investigation by Cambridgeshire Police into the children's disappearance and murder. As almost 2 weeks had elapsed following the disappearance of Holly and Jessica before Cambridgeshire Police became aware of Huntley's previous criminal background, despite his claims to be the last person to see the children alive. Further criticism was directed at the force for their initial failure to scrutinise Carr's claims to have been in Soham on the date of the children's disappearance. The inquiry also severely criticised Humberside Police for deleting information relating to the previous criminal allegations against Huntley, and also criticised Cambridgeshire Police for not following standard vetting guidelines. Both the Humberside and Cambridgeshire Police were heavily criticised for their failings in maintaining criminal intelligence records on Huntley. Bichard later ordered the suspension of the Chief of Humberside Police, David Westwood, for ordering the destruction of records pertaining to alleged child molesters which had not resulted in a conviction. This suspension was later overturned. Westwood retired in March 2005. The Chief Constable of Cambridgeshire Constabulary, Tom Lloyd, was also subjected to severe criticism as his force had failed to contact Humberside Police during the investigation into Huntley's criminal background prior to his securing employment at Soham Village College. An added complication in these criminal vetting procedures was the fact that Huntley had applied for the caretaker's job under the name of Ian Nixon, although he did disclose on the application that he was previously known as Ian Huntley. It is believed that Cambridgeshire Police failed to perform a background check under the name Huntley. Had they done so, they would have discovered an outstanding burglary charge on file relating to his November 1995 arrest for this crime. The Bichard Inquiry recommended a mandatory registration scheme for people working with children and vulnerable adults such as the elderly and mentally disabled. This recommendation later led to the foundation of the Independent Safeguarding Authority. The findings also suggested that a national system should be implemented for police forces to share intelligence information, and that all police forces should follow a clear code of practice on record keeping. These findings ultimately led to the tightening of various procedures within the Criminal Records Bureau system, including compulsory checks into potential criminal backgrounds of people who applied to work with children. In the midst of the controversy surrounding the inquiry into the Soham murders, Huntley allegedly made an unexpected confession from his jail cell in Belmarsh Prison. According to Nathan Yates's July 19, 2004 article in the Mirror, Huntley's parents claimed that their son admitted to them that he deliberately killed Jessica Chapman. The article quoted Huntley's father, Kevin, saying, "He told us how he did it. He needs to tell us more about what happened to Holly." The couple is hoping that their son will come clean about how the girls died so that Jessica and Holly's families can finally know the truth. In September 2003, Huntley faced even more problems when one of his earliest victims threatened to pursue legal action against him for sexually assaulting her 7 years earlier when she was 11 years old. Hayley Edwards claimed that Huntley repeatedly attacked her when she was with him in the woods, close to her home in Humberston. Edwards, who feared for her life at the time, waited more than half a year before filing a report with the police. An investigation was launched, yet there was not enough evidence to proceed with the case. Edwards has suffered psychologically since the attack and wants to make certain that Huntley is brought to justice. According to Edwards, she has said, "I will do everything I can to make sure he gets to court to explain what he did to me. I think if it comes to that, I will be able to get closure and try to move on." On the 23rd of July 2004, Carr's mother, Shirley Capp, was sentenced to 6 months in jail for intimidating a witness during the trial. Capp's neighbour, Marion Westerman, had told police that she had seen a crying Carr and Huntley looking in the boot of a vehicle outside Carr's mother's house shortly after 10-year-old Holly and Jessica had gone missing. Carr's mother's threats to Westerman had nearly resulted in her retracting her statement at the time and not testifying in court. On the 5th of September 2006, Ian Huntley was rushed to hospital after being found unconscious in his prison cell. He was taken to Pinderfields Hospital in Wakefield to receive treatment for a suspected drug overdose and was returned to prison the next day. Following this incident, the Home Office released a statement to the media. Huntley continues to be managed according to prison service policy on the prevention of suicide and self-harm. In particular, he will be subject to assessment, care in custody and teamwork procedures through which his risk will be continually assessed. The prison service works to minimise the risk of any prisoner taking their own life, but it cannot eliminate that risk entirely. The lives of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, cut short in a moment of senseless violence, continue to echo in the hearts of those who knew them and in the collective consciousness of a nation. Their laughter, dreams, and their potential remain vivid in the memories of their loved ones and the community they called home. Yet from the depths of tragedy, seeds of change have taken root. The harrowing events that fateful day spurred a collective resolve to confront the failings in our systems and society. In the aftermath, communities came together, bonds were strengthened, and reforms were enacted. Measures were put in place to enhance child safety, improve communication between authorities, and bolster support for victims and their families. Through the darkness emerged a flicker of hope, a commitment to honour the legacy of Holly and Jessica by striving for a world where every child can thrive, free from fear and harm. As we reflect on their lives and the enduring impact of their loss, let us also celebrate the progress made in their names. Though they may no longer walk among us, their memories endure as beacons of light, guiding us towards a brighter and safer future. Thank you for listening to this episode of Shadow Crimes. If you liked this episode, be sure to follow us on social media and check out our website at shadowcrimes.com. Remember, you can also listen to this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, as well as all other podcast platforms. Be sure to check out our other episodes and stay tuned for new episodes released every Wednesday here on Shadow Crimes, where mysteries thrive and shadows speak.